Hey everyone, hello, hope you're having a great day and welcome to how to quickly deliver pixel perfect apps with high performance, low code. Woo, that is a mouthful to say. And it's a topic that is urgent right now. So we're really happy to be bringing this to you today. Now, today's webinar is sponsored by OutSystems and produced by Actual Tech Media. My name is Keith Ward. I'm with Actual Tech Media, and I am truly excited to be your moderator for this special event. But before we get to today's presentation, there are a few housekeeping items you need to know that will help you get the most out of this session. First of all, we want this to be an informative event for you, so we encourage any questions in the questions box in your webinar control panel. That's also the place to let us know where you're logging in from, and you're logging in from all over today, as we can see, from Wisconsin and St. Louis and Tulsa, Oklahoma, LA, Jackson, Mississippi, Denver, Moore, Wisconsin, Atlanta, New Jersey. So you folks are all over logging in. Glad to see you with us today. All right, so that Q&A panel where you logged in on, or where you're telling us where you're logging in from, is also the place to let us know about any technical issues you might be having. A browser refresh will fix most audio, video, and slide advancement issues, so just hit that refresh button. If that doesn't work, then let us know in the Q&A, and we'll get our team on top of it and help you out. Okay, up next, we've got the handouts section. That's the tab right next to the questions tab in the Q&A panel. Now, in the handouts section, you'll find a number of outstanding and important resources. I'd especially like to call your attention to 3 important handouts from OutSystems, where you can get more information on today's topic. Please look those over. Also, check out the link to the Gorilla Guide Book Club, where you can get access to Actual Tech Media's vast library of printed resources on a wide array of technology topics. There you'll also find a link to the Actual Tech Media Events Center, which has our calendar of upcoming events. And finally, at the end of this webinar, we'll be awarding a $250 Amazon gift card to one lucky registrant. Now, as always, you have to be in attendance for the entire webinar to be eligible. Now, the official terms and conditions of the prize drawing can be found also in that handout section. So that takes care of all that stuff. With that, let's get to today's awesome content, and it really is going to be that. It is my pleasure to introduce you to our presenters today, Hans van Grieken, Mafalda Povash, and Barry Goff. Hans, you're leading this discussion, so I'll turn it over to you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Hans van Grieken. It's my pleasure today to host this event and introduce to you the 2 speakers that we have invited. First of all, Mafalda Povash. She's a product and solutions marketing manager at OutSystems. She manages the positioning, messaging, and go-to-market strategy of the product. And also, very interesting, she graduated cum laude at the Business Administration Postgraduate Program of INSEAD. And then there's Barry Goff. Barry is a Senior Director, Platform Strategy. He leads OutSystems development guidance for clients. And also he tries to identify what value can be created by the platform and what new functionalities could be added. He has a long history in tech, but I'm sure we'll touch upon that later. Mm-hmm. So for today, we're going to touch upon this topic of speed and of the quick delivery of pixel perfect apps. Now, before moving to our 2 speakers, I just want to set the stage for a moment here. After COVID, a lot of companies have been sort of surprised with their ability to create apps quickly in such a way that their employees, their business partners, or their customers would engage with them, given the nature of what happened across the world. And for a lot of companies, that was quite a call, because they found out that their legacy systems could not be integrated into their apps. Their ability to create them across different platforms and different geographies was challenged. And so for a lot of companies, as part of their digital transformation, to create apps fast, platform independent, and to do that in such a way that they're secure and scalable by design, has turned out to be quite a challenge. And so the pressure to look into new approaches that could help you to be faster and to be more predictive and more productive has been a real topic in research across the world. Being myself a former researcher in the Gartner world, it is interesting to see that introducing OutSystems, for those of you that do not know the company, that across 4 different dimensions, OutSystems, according to my former colleagues at Gartner, really is spot on. First of all, the use case of transactional applications for business to consumer. OutSystems was ranked number 1 in the 2023 Gartner Critical Capabilities for Enterprise Low-Code Applications platforms. The second use case, a very important one, business workflows and systems integration, also number 1. And the third one, the use case on back office apps with pro and citizen developers, similar. And finally, a very important one for a lot of companies, particularly those with a lot of legacy, the modernization and move towards innovation with prototyping, in which, according to Gartner, OutSystems scored number 2. So there's a lot to be talked about in this topic. And as you can see here, it's a crowded place, and it's a place that has become more crowded over the past years. Just as an introductory question to you, Barry, because you've been around in this industry for a long time, is this something that you see when the company started out 20 years ago? Is this growth of competitors that are entering the space something that you see in the market?
Well, certainly in every tech trend, there are lots of folks that jump on the bandwagon. But I have to say, in my 30 plus years in the industry, the sheer number of companies that now, either claim to have a low code solution or are getting into the no code game, it's really mind boggling. I think at last count, there are almost 300 different companies that are variously associated with this category.
Yeah. So it's growing. It's a space which is interesting to a lot of different vendors. And so let's start our conversation with you, Mafalda, on building these pixel perfect applications. For those in this webinar that are not familiar with the term, what is pixel perfect?
Yeah, so creating pixel perfect apps means creating user interfaces that are implemented exactly according to the design, and they should look identical across the different devices down to the last pixel. So this means sharp edges, fluid animations, perfect alignment and spacing, color management, and those apps should look simple, intuitive, and clean.
Yeah. So if you look, sorry to interrupt you, but for an average customer that you service, how many of these different channels are there and need to be serviced in a pixel perfect manner?
Yeah, so at least a web portal, a mobile app, a kiosk. So I would say these are the 3 most common, at least. Yeah. But there are more. Of course, there are more. And the more there are, the more difficult it is to create this pixel perfect experiences across all of those touch points. And we know it's very important to create these experiences because this will affect the trust that a user has while using that app. So let's say someone is shopping on an app, on a mobile app, and if for some reason those animations are not fluid or something doesn't feel right, this will not provide a good experience for the user. So probably next time they will prefer to use another app from a competitor that is easier to use or looks better. So
let's dive into some of these challenges, right? Because any company would agree with you, or public sector organization for that matter, that you need to be close to the customer, you need a service on any device and any channel. But that turns out to be quite difficult. Here's one, the design itself.
Yeah, so actually, I was just going to say before we jump right into the challenges of building these pixel perfect apps, that it's actually critical for companies to get this right, because 84% of customers actually say that the experience is just as important as the products they provide. So so this is a testament of the importance of building pixel perfect apps, right? But to your point, why is it so challenging, right? I think one of the first reasons why it is so challenging is because it all begins with great UX, right? So it's hard and it's expensive to hire these great UX designers. So I think that that's the first reason. So most of the organizations that can actually afford to have these experts in-house. Yeah. So the second one is that it actually it's required to build almost separate versions of each app for each touch point. So even though it can be easy to build it pixel perfect the first time, the fact that you have to replicate that across the multiple touch points makes it harder. So that I think it's the second reason.
Yeah, and the third one, when we touch upon that one, the difficulty to keep up with
exactly. So that's
updates, right?
That's the third one, right? Because if you get it right, okay, you get it right first, but then the pressure to get new versions out there, because customer feedback keeps coming in. So if you want to stay relevant to your users and to your customers, you want to make sure that you act on their feedback. So the fact that you need to keep up and keep pushing those versions on a weekly basis, sometimes that means it's really difficult to make sure that those changes are reflected across all the touch points, and they still look pixel perfect.
Yeah. So given your background in this industry, right? If you look at the publishing rate and the life cycle of apps, is it your conclusion that the speed at which this happens and the life cycle, so to say, of an app has reduced over the past years?
Yeah, absolutely. Not only because of customer expectations, but also because companies are trying to be more innovative. So that's because they want to launch new features, they want to launch new services. So all of that requires changes, not just the customer feedback, right? But because they want to stay relevant and they want to wow their customers.
Yeah. So if it were all that easy, we would all be on the Bahamas, but obviously it's difficult. What are some of the impediments of building pixel perfect apps?
Yeah, so based on our experience and what we've heard from our customers, there's like a UX or shortage, right? So it's very hard to hire skilled people that can create these beautiful designs from scratch. So that's the first one. The second impediment is that traditional development is quite slow, right? Because it uses so many tools, so many frameworks, and it's just impossible to reuse components across touch points. So that makes it really hard to keep up for IT teams to keep up with the business needs and to move at the pace of the business.
Mm-hmm. The third one
is that the alternative to traditional development, because it is so slow, would be to then use off-the-shelf packages, right? The thing is, and we've heard this multiple times, is that, well, to begin with, maybe there aren't any available off-the-shelf packages, right? And even if there are, they're so difficult to customize and it's so difficult to integrate with the existing tech stack that makes it really difficult for companies to consider that a viable solution. And to be honest, like using an off-the-shelf package should not be a solution at all, because the entire purpose of building your own app is because you want to customize it and you want to create your differentiation. That's how you generate competitive advantage, right? Yeah. So I would say these are the main impediments.
Yeah. If you look at the platform, just in a few words, how does OutSystems, for instance, address this element of reusability of components, which is a huge benefit to speeding up, right? And to having control on your look and feel and on governance and so forth. How does OutSystems do that?
I think it's not limited to the reusability of components. That's definitely one of the important ones. But the fact that, for instance, the way you authenticate into an app, that can be a component that you just replicate across the other touch points, that's a major thing, right? So you just don't have to go through the effort of doing that for every touch point. And that actually creates consistency in the process for users, so which is an added benefit. The other one, I mean, the other benefits I would say is visual development, right? So the ability to rapid prototype versions is how you can actually keep up with customer requirements and making sure you act on that feedback. And also the fact that you have pre-built templates that you can customize. It's really important to accelerate development, because if you don't have in-house the UXers that you wished you have, well, then you can just start with templates that already reflect UX best practices, and you can make them your own. So you can just customize, and that just alone will speed up the process a lot.
Yeah, or hire an external team from a consultancy that within the boundaries of what the system puts in place, right? Perfect. So let's go to the second part about how does high performance low code help in this space. Barry, if I can move over to you, tell us a bit about the difference between, let's call it low code, run of the mill versus low code in a high performance environment.
Yeah, thanks for that question, Hans. As Mafalda was explaining, there are a lot of challenges building apps in multi-channel apps that are pixel perfect with traditional tools, methodologies, processes. And the promise of low code has been that using visual development, we can speed up that process significantly. The challenge with most low code platforms is, while they can speed up the development process, they fall down when it comes to a lot of the other requirements that you need in order to build mission critical, customer facing kinds of applications. Security isn't adequate. Governance for the development process is missing. There isn't sufficient CI/CD infrastructure to get you past version 1 of the application. And the development capabilities tend to be fairly limited as well. And so that's where high performance low code comes in. The idea with high performance low code is that we want to be able to deliver the developer productivity benefits that come with visual model-based programming, but also deliver a platform that addresses all those shortcomings that make it hard to build these high-scale, pixel-perfect, customer-facing, mission-critical kinds of applications.
And in that space, sorry to interrupt you, but in that space, it strikes me that OutSystems is really focusing on the tech professional, right? You feel that's an important part of your high-performance message.
Exactly. That's a great distinction, Hans. Most low-code platforms are really designed for a business professional to build applications that maybe automate a work group kind of process, and so naturally you wouldn't use those capabilities to build a banking application, a customer banking app. OutSystems from the very beginning was designed as a tool to be used by IT and professional developers to speed up those processes within IT, not to be used by a business analyst. So things like,
well, you do see your fair share of citizen developers on your platform, but the focus is really on putting in place this, let's say, predictable machine of high performance low code production.
Yeah, absolutely. The interesting thing about a lot of citizen development initiatives is those business users often create things that are really valuable, and they start to get used by more and more people, but then those platforms hit a ceiling, and we want to avoid
not
that, right?
scalable, not secure. Yeah.
Right, exactly. If you start out with 100 people using the app, and then all of a sudden it's 1,000 or 10,000 people, if you haven't architected in the headroom up front, then you end up having to throw it out and start over. And so we want to be able to avoid that challenge.
Yeah. So during Next Step, the global conference that OutSystems organizes every year, the OutSystems Developer Cloud was presented. A project up before was under the name of Neon. So tell us a bit about the importance of the OutSystems Developers Cloud as part of high performance low code.
Right. Yeah. ODC is particularly interesting when we're talking about these customer-facing application scenarios. So at its core, what ODC is it's a deployment option of the OutSystems platform that's built specifically on cloud-native technology. And so let me step back for a second and define what I mean by cloud-native. Lots of people today claim to be cloud-native because they have implemented Kubernetes somewhere in their tech stack, but that's really kind of missing the point. Cloud-native really requires a number of different technology and architecture architectural components in order to provide the benefits of seamless auto scaling, seamless geographic distribution, seamless ability to be resilient. And so, yes, Kubernetes is an essential part of that architecture, as are Linux containers, but you also need to have a microservices approach to the architecture, and you need to have native cloud services underlying the infrastructure for things like security, authentication, your data, secrets, networking, right? If you don't have all of those components, then you don't get the real benefits of cloud native. And the reason
sorry to interrupt you, but is it fair to say that by taking this high cut in the technology operating model, you can fully focus on the customer interface, on the creativity that comes with that, and the business value, because all the other parts are taken care of in the technology stack?
Yeah, precisely, Hans. That's the value proposition of ODC. Is what we've done is we've created a cloud native runtime that meets all those requirements that I just outlined. It's microservices, it's Kubernetes, but it's also all the key underlying native cloud services. And we've built that for you, right? The customers that we've talked to that have tried to do it themselves, it generally takes 12 to 18 months to build the underlying infrastructure and can cost upwards of $2.5 million. And you get to the end of it, and only then can you actually start building applications. And so in building this in the box of ODC, we provide that native cloud infrastructure for you. So all you have to do is build your applications starting on day one. And when you deploy them, those applications get all of the benefits of auto scaling, being able to scale to hundreds of millions of users, and doing it dynamically, right? So no downtime. So think of the Cyber Monday or Black Friday scenario where you go from having 1 million users to 10 million users overnight
in a day.
Yeah, right. We want to with ODC deliver a platform that has the capabilities of supporting your applications through those scenarios without you having to do any extra work.
Now, one of the topics that is on the minds of everybody in the tech space is obviously artificial intelligence, and also in the low-code space, there's a lot of players, colleagues of yours, that claim that they are using AI capabilities as part of their offering to the market. What makes OutSystems different in this perspective?
Yeah, that's actually a really fun topic. So it is true that there are lots of folks using AI effectively when it comes to augmented development.
Which is a real benefit, right? I mean, productive.
Absolutely. And we've invested tons in that technology. And one of I think the important nuances of how we've implemented that technology is specific towards professional developers. And what I mean by that is professional developers don't want to be, interrupted. They don't want to be, they don't want to have to undo work that AI did for them that they don't necessarily agree with. So with our AI augmented development, the implementation is very subtle and non-intrusive. So we offer up the ability to automatically finish off workflows based on the AI's understanding of what the developer is trying to accomplish. But the way it's implemented in the IDE is super subtle. So it doesn't get in the way of a professional developer expressing their creativity. But then I'd also
just before we go to the next point here, but I think it's also very important to say a few words about what is the body of data behind this.
Yeah, that's a great point too, right? One of the benefits of having been in the business of development platforms for over 20 years, 21 actually now, this year, is that we have many tens of millions of application graphs that we can use to train our AI models. So the sophistication of our AI models are far ahead of what most of the companies in this industry are able to accomplish, just because
of the size of the base.
Right. We're very lucky in that respect. But the thing that I was going to say before that I think is really unique about OutSystems is that we're not only using our AI capabilities to augment the development process. We actually use AI across the entire software development lifecycle. So, for instance, we've implemented a really cool capability that we call AI Security Mentor that scans through your code to identify security vulnerabilities that might have been introduced during the development process, right? So we have security at every layer from design time to runtime. But in the case where a developer actually opens up a security vulnerability, we're using AI to identify that and help a developer close that. We also use AI to scan through your entire portfolio and look for duplicated code. We call that the AI maintainability mentor to help identify where there's duplicated code, refactor your applications. Mafalda actually provided a really cool example earlier with authentication, right? You might have written some authentication code for a mobile app and some authentication code for a web app and some authentication code for some other application. The AI maintainability mentor can find where you have this duplicated code and then help you refactor that code into a central component that can then be reused over time. So that reduces technical debt.
You see a lot of companies, both of you, how many components should one think of when you're talking about this approach? In an average bank, how many of these reusable components that are kept in one place, that are designed, tested, scalable by design?
Yeah.
How many of these components could you think of?
Yeah, it could be thousands, right? We have customers that have 500, 800 apps in their portfolios. And one of the cool things about OutSystems is, right, you can take a whole app and turn it into a reusable component. But our IDE it's a full stack IDE, and you could take a UI construct, you could take a data construct, you could take a workflow construct, and encapsulate each of those little things into a reusable component. So just depending upon the sophistication of your portfolio, you can make anything reusable. And one of my favorite quotes from a customer in Portugal is the more you build, the less you have to build with OutSystems, because everything that you can build, you can turn into a reusable component. And as you build out your portfolio, it becomes vastly quicker to take advantage of those components and innovate with new solutions.
Perfect. Thanks for that, Barry. So Mafalda, turning back to you, I think it's a good moment to give some typical examples of companies that have gone through this process, both from public sector as well as from the private sector. Let's just start with the first one. Vis, it's a European company. I think they're from Iceland, and they created...
Yeah. So actually, we've seen, many companies being successful using our platform. And this one in particular is an insurance company in Iceland. So they wanted to launch a new usage-based policy for car insurance. But that type of solution required the integration with complex systems, namely with a telematics solution. The other challenge they had was that because they wanted to really customize UX, because this app was tailored mainly for young drivers. So it has to be really appealing from a UX standpoint. So actually,
maybe just a few words about the telematics, because I think it's important to understand the business proposition that was behind it.
Well, yeah, I think it's a great value proposition, because what this app is actually game changing for insurance, because it actually benefits and rewards safe drivers. So the way you drive affects how much you pay for your car insurance. So that's great, right? Because it's not only a great app, but it actually has also this amazing social responsibility vector to it. So that's great. So that's why it needs to integrate with telematics, because it's the only way for the app to track how a driver actually drives, how often he brakes, if it speeds up too much. So that's the type of things that telematics will inform the app. So this is a very complex type of project, and it was possible for Vis to build this app in only 4 months with all these complex integrations, also with some insurance core systems as well, because they actually used some pre-built connectors to integrate with all those systems. And then they were able to use some templates that they then customized to meet their UX design. So that's how they were able to actually build this app in 4 months. And what's interesting is that the other aspect and the reason why it was so well received in Iceland, well, actually it was Iceland's most downloaded app on launch, is that they created a social media interaction with their users, and they were actually collecting feedback from social media. So they were they were actually able to act on that feedback and iterate the app based on that. So I think that those were the ingredients for the success of this app, which is called OcuVisor.
Yeah, I could imagine that there's two questions at least come to my mind. The first one is, for them to decide such a thing, they've never been in telematics in an insurance company. So you're telling me that they're integrating a completely different technology into the platform, and they don't need to know because it's just a data feed that comes in and that is personalized without looking at people's movements, so to say.
Yeah,
how did
absolutely.
they deal with that? How did they acquire the knowledge to do this, or was it an external company that is?
Yeah, they also work with external company to help them with that. But I think the most important thing that I think it's worth calling out is really just the concept of it, right? Yeah. So this is really groundbreaking for insurance. So the concept of using telematics rather than just using, like the models they have to calculate the policy, I think it's really what matters. So this is truly a customer-centric innovation. And then they just made sure that they used the right platform that would abstract that complexity so they could just easily connect with that solution and collect the data they needed to build this app. So I think that's the most important thing about this app.
Well, I could also imagine that is strategic to them because younger people on average have more accidents than older people in cars. Is that correct?
I'm not sure that was the exact reason why they built that. I think they just wanted to promote fairness, which is already good enough, right? So that was
for them, the business case was also there in that
exactly. Space, and I think that's great because sometimes young people are actually the most cautious because they don't have the experience as other drivers. So I think that's actually sometimes unfair that they have to pay extra for their policies. So I think the principle was very good. So it's good to see that building digital apps actually enable this kind of business models that promote fairness, that promote safe driving. So that's amazing.
Yeah. So second one, Planet, completely different world, but a similar complexity. Tell us all about it.
This is a completely different type of thing. So also a world's first. Actually, Planet developed this end-to-end digital tax refund solution in Dubai. So this is a very interesting solution. It was also built in less than 4 months because Planet had to comply with that timeline. And it's interesting because they've built this app with 16 developers instead of 60. So this gives you an idea of like the potential of using high performance low code. And this is actually very interesting because going back to our earlier point on the multiple touch points and reusability, this app actually is a mobile app for tourists. It's a web portal for the tax authorities, and there's also a portal for merchants, and there's also a kiosk for tourists. So as you see, multiple types of touch points, an entire ecosystem, because this connects the kiosk in the airport with every shopper with the web services of tax authorities. So this requires massive integrations. This requires amazing UI for this many different touch points. So it's impressive how Planet created this entire ecosystem. And what's more, they actually created more apps than the ones that are just these three, like for the tourists, the shoppers, the shoppers, the merchants, and the authorities. They actually created their own CRM. So they created a call management system on top of this. So this is a full-blown solution. And they built this in less than 4 months. Again,
I think that's a very important one. So there's one single source of truth, and around that, different apps are created for different target audiences that take part of that information and add their information to it.
Yeah, exactly. And the main purpose of this system is to speed up the process, to encourage tourists to shop even more. So because the entire purpose is to make this information flow seamless, right? So if tax authorities can collect that data and have, based on that, single source of truth, then tourists can just collect their refunds at the airport before they fly back. So exactly, that's
and this was a Middle East example, but I understand that 3 other countries have already implemented this as well.
Yeah, so as far as we know, at least in Turkey and Finland, they've also rolled out this solution. And this is very interesting, right? Because this is now a platform that planets can use in other airports, in other countries. So it's amazing that in 4 months they were able to build an entire new product offer for their portfolio.
Yeah. The third one is obviously a really interesting one as well, a big one for sure.
Yes.
Western Union.
Yeah, so Western Union had a different challenge. So Western Union wanted to build a digital banking app, but they also wanted to move from a legacy on-prem IT infrastructure to the cloud, right? So it's a banking app. So one of the major requirements was security, right? So, and this is why using HPLC, it's a game changer, because it just comes built in. So you can build with the confidence that you don't have that vulnerability. The other interesting thing is that they actually wanted to roll it out in different countries, so different currencies. And they were able to do that because of the rapid iteration cycles, because it's just so rapid to create prototypes and really go to market faster. So it's really interesting because our customer, the Western Union, actually said that they're now getting their products to market at least twice as fast as their competitors and using 1/10 of the resources. So I think this is impressive. And the app looks great.
It's also a company, as I understand from the interview that your CEO had with their CTO. We'll make sure that the link is in the webinar as well. But it's also a company that has gone through a massive process, on the one hand, to create this tempting front end, but also to move to cloud and to modern architectures as well.
That's really the beauty of HPLC, right? Because it just really covers a huge breadth of use cases. So whether you're just building a front end or a beautiful mobile app, you really can use it for any type of project. And Western Union is a good example of that. So they're really doing this massive shift of going to the cloud and really transforming how they develop software. And they also deliver this amazing and beautiful looking app. So this is what you can do with HPLC, right?
Just covers
huge breadth of use cases. Yes.
Well, thanks for that, Mafalda. Barry, just to move to you again, particularly on this case, is this something that you see a lot, that by modernizing the front end using high performant low code, at the same time, the company takes its legacy gradually to the cloud, changes its architecture and so forth. So these two different goals, back end and front end, at the same time. Is that something you see more often?
Yeah, it's super interesting, Hans, because OutSystems has customers in, I think, 87 different countries and 22 different different industries, and the customer journeys are sort of come from every single direction, right? Some customers start with small tactical internal applications that are super low risk, an employee facing sort of application, for instance. And from there, based on the success that they see around productivity, they start to expand their portfolio into more and more strategic areas. But then there are companies like Western Union where they start with a strategic, their most strategic asset, and completing an entire digital transformation initiative based on their core go-to-market mission critical offering.
Yeah.
And then they do
that in a sorry to interrupt you, but I think it's
Yeah.
important. Other element in a highly regulated market.
Yeah,
Does the OutSystems platform allow for, let's say, higher degrees of compliance in the way in which you set up your environment?
right. Yeah, oh, yeah, absolutely. Governance and compliance are as important as security from our perspective. So it's not just an aspect of making sure that we avoid code vulnerabilities, but we want to make sure that operationally we're enforcing the right policies and that we provide the controls for centralized IT management to ensure that developers aren't improperly exposing data. There are a number of customers who started with strategic initiatives on competing platforms and realized that their developers were exposing their most critical data accidentally, and stopped working on those platforms and moved to OutSystems because of the zero trust governance model that we implement by default.
Yeah. Mafalda, there's one of your web pages which you're passionate about is about what makes a good customer experience, right? Make it effortless, make it consistent, and make it self-service. What is a typical example of a self-service customer experience that comes to your mind that you think that's really awesome?
I think there are many different self-service experiences that we have and that we experience on a daily basis. So I think the ones that come to my mind are obviously banking, because we use them so often. And the other one would have to be probably healthcare related. So how easy it is, for instance, to book an appointment, to have teleconsultation, to have access to your prescriptions, to have a direct channel to interact with your doctor. I think that's also the kind of app where it's really good. What I feel like I'm self-servicing, right? Because I just have everything I have power, and I feel that I'm in control, which I think is what most users want to feel like. They have access to the information that they need, when they need, and through their preferred touch point. And obviously, creating that type of services also creates other type of opportunities. So I think that's why self-service is important, not only because you have access to the most common things, but because of the opportunities it also opens up.
We have time for a few questions. One question, Barry, is how much time does it take to put in place this high-performance, low-code environment? I mean, this is something that you obviously need to train your team on, that you really need to have some procedures around and so forth. So how much time does it take to put this in place in such a way that it is really productive?
Right. Yeah, there's two ways that I'd answer that. One is the tools and infrastructure are designed in a way that a developer jumping in is going to feel comfortable and productive, and is not going to need months of training in order for them to build their first app. So that experience of getting a developer up to speed in hours or days is a really important part of what we deliver. The other thing that I think is important is as a company, we sort of take very seriously all the other pieces of the puzzle that helps our customers hit the ground running. So we have a global partner network that includes both small regional partners as well as large global organizations. All the sort of usual suspects that large corporations work with on a day-to-day basis have mature OutSystems practices. We also have a strong professional services organization that can help with not only training your organization, but actually helping design the architecture and and launch projects for organizations. So, whether you want to do it all yourself or whether you have a partner that you want to bring into the mix, we have done all the work to make sure that customers can hit the ground running.
Yeah. Mafalda, another question that came up was, you having had the INSEAD experience on strategy, how strategic is this for companies, do you think?
I think this is probably the most strategic thing, right? So I'm just going to repeat the data point that I mentioned earlier. Like 84% of customers say the experience is as important as the products and services. So I think
in all industries or in public sector, I mean, this is not across the board, is it?
I think it is across the board, although obviously in areas like public sector is not as easy because they don't have the same type of competition, right? So citizens just have to use what they have available. But I think this is definitely important. And we actually have examples of governments that are, placing huge bets on their digital transformation programs, such as the Faroe Islands, and they're doing amazing stuff.
Webinars. Yeah.
Exactly. So they're a great example of how some governments are taking this seriously, even though they don't obviously have competition as organizations in other industries have. But I think this is strategic because, again, this is not only about the experience that you provide to customers. This really has the opportunity to open up new business models like just these did, right? That's an entire new concept. So that is the type of innovations that customers expect. And that's really what keeps the business growing, right? Is the ability to launch innovation and to launch that innovation faster. So that's why I would say this is critical. Building these types of apps and building them right is really, I think, the recipe for success.
And just to chime in for a second and amplify what Mafalda was saying, what's interesting to me is sort of the flywheel effect of the companies that are being successful implementing these great customer experiences like Western Union and Visa. They are setting a high standard of what customers can expect. And that standard starts to bleed over into business to business interactions, even business to employee interactions, right? We see a lot of our customers investing in really high quality internal employee portals because their employees have an incredibly high expectation of like what self-service means, like what Mafalda was talking about. So it's interesting to me that—
Does that also mean that OutSystems is used as a wrapper around a piece of legacy software that is important to employees? Is that the type
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And even core systems like, say, CRM, right? Where a customer might have an investment in a off-the-shelf or SaaS CRM solution, but the expectations of employees is high enough that the company isn't going to invest to use OutSystems to provide a better experience of that underlying CRM system.
Yeah. One last question that came up from one of our viewers, which was, if it's true that this is so strategic to a company, then doesn't the platform in itself pose some form of lock-in? In other words, how free am I in my choice of technologies in the future? Would you care to respond on that?
Yeah, I think there are two interesting aspects to that. One is OutSystems is unique in that we are not an interpreted language kind of platform. We, in the process of taking the visual model of your application, we turn those applications into real C# code. So there is an opportunity to take your code away if you decide that OutSystems is no longer your strategic platform.
I'm sure that the question was not asked because people expect that to happen, but nevertheless, you want to know, right?
Yeah, but the other thing that's interesting that I'd say is even more interesting is because OutSystems is offering a cloud solution that abstracts away all the complexity of the underlying technology. We can continuously update the technology without affecting your application. So we have companies that built apps 20 years ago that they've continued to evolve in their portfolio. And over the decades, we've been able to continuously evolve the underlying technology and keep their apps up to date in a way that doesn't, create major discontinuity. So
so the system is loosely coupled in such a way that you can still evolve whilst you keep your initial investment secure.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, this has been a great interview as far as I'm concerned. So thank you very much, Mafalda and Barry, for your time.
All right. Had a little bit of a technical glitch right at the end there, but the presentation was over anyway, so it worked out okay. That was a great presentation. I think that we're at the best point ever for developers, being able to create apps faster, make them more efficient, and things like this are a key factor in that. So such great information from all of you. We really appreciate your time in that presentation today. So before we wrap up, we are now at the point of our last piece of business, which is giving away the $250 Amazon gift card. As I mentioned before, you do have to have been present for the entire event to be eligible for the gift card, as you do for all of our Actual Tech Media events. And the winner of today's gift card is Tina Cheney from Ohio. Congratulations, Tina. We'll be in touch to get you your card ASAP. And with that, on behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I want to thank OutSystems for making today's wonderful event possible. And thanks, as always, to you, all of you who attended, for being here and for your great questions for our presenters today. That concludes today's event, and have a great rest of your day.